Hello. Are you having a good day? Yes. I will go then. You do not need me. It's a delight to be here. As Anthony said, I've known Anthony for some years now, and Anthony truly is the poster child for everything I say in the book. So everything I'm going to talk about today, you can just imagine Anthony doing, sitting in his... I have to start by admitting that despite having written a book called How to Have a Good Day and having those words behind me, not every day in my life has been a good one. I know, there was an actual intake of breath over there, very good. In fact, when I'm standing in front of an audience in heels, I'm always reminded of a day which was quite early in my consulting career, a moment that many of you might have experienced, you know, where it's the very first time that you're the one giving the final presentation to the client. I'd had a career before, but it was still fairly new for me, my third project at McKinsey. And before then, it had always been my boss giving the final presentation. He said, "It's your time to shine, Caroline." So I was excited. My materials were locked and loaded. Actually, I say that was actually the last presentation I ever did on acetates overhead slides. Yeah, no, there are a good chunk of you don't know what that is. So I had my acetate slides locked and loaded, and but I was nervous because, you know, it was standing up in front of a room like this. And so the thing is, I was really preparing mentally as well. I was thinking about how can I project gravitas and presence into the room, given that I feel a bit nervous, which I was mostly doing by striding about like this, as boldly as I could. Is it working? In my mind, at least, it was working. It was totally working. I really felt like I was owning the room. But then what happened next was, as I took an especially bold step into the middle of the room, I heard a crack. Do any of you know what happened? Yeah, okay. I did not know that this was possible at the time. They were a very well-worn pair of shoes. It turns out it is entirely possible for the heel on a shoe to break off completely. So as I was lying on the floor, it turned out to be very difficult to project any gravitas or presence into the room. So not every day can be a good one. There is luck involved, as several people have said. We do have occasionally wardrobe malfunctions, much more often technology malfunctions, or even, dare I say it, colleague malfunctions. Obviously, you will have perfect colleagues. I mean, you know, but on the occasional days when they're not behaving as they might. So I've long been interested in what's our wiggle room. You know, yes, there's a lot of life that is about luck, but what is there that is actually open to us to control? And my toolkit for that has always been behavioural science, and neuroscience, psychology, the behavioural bits of economics. These are the folks in labs around the world who are trying to understand the quirks of our brains, why we're a bit odd, why we're a bit weird, and why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. And it's a really optimistic message because you can't change everything, but once you understand a little bit about how our brains work and what conditions we need for them to function at their best, it actually turns out that we can shift, we can control more of our daily experience than we perhaps think. And given that you're a group of people who are all trying to be at your best all the time, you're doing complex creative work, I thought you might like to know three tiny things. I deal a lot in tiny tweaks that have bigger effects than you might expect. Three tiny things I'm going to talk about now that can have a surprising effect on the way that your days feel. I'm going to talk about something which can shift the way you experience reality. You may say, woo. Yeah, thank you. God. Tough crowd. I'm going to talk about how you get more time in the day, and I'm going to talk about how you can remote control other people's moods. Does that sound useful? Okay, all right. Hopefully it would help you with everything else that you've heard today. So let me start by talking about how to edit your reality. I'll talk about a day which was not great, not because my shoes had malfunctioned, but a little bit further on in my consulting career. It wasn't great, not just because there were insufficient number of dogs in hats in the room. It was a day that I was on a project that I was not that excited about. How many of you have a thing on your plate that you're not that excited about? Yeah, it was that thing. And it was the first day that we were meeting the clients. And I was being paired with a colleague who was very excited about the project, and he had a deck of 300 pages that he was going to present, and come what may. And we were showing up for the client meeting, and I was grumpy. I was grumpy because I didn't want to be on the project. I was also grumpy because it was a video conference, and I thought we should have been on a plane to go and meet the people because, you know, that's just my view. And then there was also the fact that it was a horrible room. It was as dark as this, but low ceiling, super long and thin. You walk in and you feel like you're in a judicial hearing. Horrible. So I walk in, I know it's going to be a bad meeting, and sure enough, I'm absolutely right. Lots of frowns, lots of people interrupting each other, lots of people talking over each other, lots of kind of just antsy, you know, the sort of thing, just a sticky meeting. So afterwards, I think I've got to talk to my colleague, Lucas, his name is, man of 300 pages. I've got to talk to him about the fact we've got off on the wrong foot with the clients. You know, it really matters how you start. And so I had a conversation with him, and I was talking to him about what I'd observed and, you know, why I thought there was a problem. And he looked at me kind of like this, body language speaking volumes, just like, shaking my head sort of thing. Turned out he did not experience the meeting like I did. He told me that there were several times that the clients had said, this is a great meeting. Several times that people had actually laughed out loud. And it was one of those situations where I didn't think he was making it up. Yes, he had a different personality, but there was enough that was credible in what he was saying that just really sounded plausible. It was on the edge of my consciousness. So the question is, what the hell happened? Why did he have such a different experience? And to be specific, you know, why did he enjoy it so much more than I did? And the answer goes back to the way that our brains process information. So the part of your brain that you're using, I really hope, to listen to me right now, and the part of my brain that I'm using to speak to you, the conscious part of our brain, the deliberate system, as I call it, because it's everything that we do deliberately, is super smart, takes care of reasoning, self-control, planning, but it can only process a certain amount of information at once. So if you think about the amount of information that's in the room right now, and you think about the amount of information you've heard today, but just even right now, and you think about, if you wanted to, you could look at the hairs on the head of the person next to you and really focus on every single one of them in a non-creepy, there's no way of doing this in a non-creepy way, actually. Go ahead. Have a look at everything that's around you, every object, every contour, every shape. All of these are pieces of data. There are trillions of pieces of data around us. Our brain can't cope with them all. So we've got a super elegant solution, which is that subconsciously, your brain is filtering out a great deal of what's going on around you at any given time. But you're not aware of it by definition because it's happening subconsciously. The idea is to lighten your load on the conscious part of your brain. Whew. So that's weird. So you're all experiencing just a partial version of reality. But the question is, how do we use that information? And this is where it becomes useful because it turns out that there is a predictable way that the brain decides what's relevant enough for us to actually consciously see and hear, and what's irrelevant and kind of gets filtered out like spam, but unconsciously. And the rule is this: whatever is already top of mind for us, whatever's already top of mind for us will guide whatever our brain thinks is relevant in us for us to notice. So what that means is that whatever our aim is, whatever our attitude is, whatever our assumption is as we go into a conversation or any experience, our brain will make sure we see anything that matches that. One of my favorite studies on this, because a lot of studies, a lot of research is done in a lab, but the more realistic the experiment is, the more you feel like, oh my God, that's actually real and that could happen to me. My favorite study on this is done with a bunch of radiologists at Harvard. You know what radiologists do. If you've ever broken a bone, or they're the ones that look at scans of your body to see what's wrong. So they have a stack of, in this case, lung scans, and they're genuine, and they're looking for nodules. And the last of the lung scans, there is a gorilla printed. How many of the radiologists see the gorilla? 83% of them, 83% of them do not see the gorilla, despite the fact that eye tracking devices showed they looked directly at it, and despite the fact that the gorilla is 48 times the size of the average lung nodule. And these are people who are trained to look for abnormalities. That's how powerful the brain's filtering mechanism is. So why didn't they see it? They didn't see it because it wasn't top of mind for them to see a gorilla. They weren't expecting to see one. It wasn't on their mind, so they didn't see it. That's how powerful it can be. And it's not just with objects, it's also with attitudes. So sad people, in another study, I don't know how the researchers made the people sad. Let's not go there. Sad people viewed a hill as steeper and less pleasant to climb. In another study where researchers put half their group into a randomly bad mood by giving them terrible test results on a test that they'd just taken, they just then asked the group, look at this really neutral description of an individual. What do you think of them? The people who'd been given really low test scores, randomly, been put in a bad mood, decided that this person was less likable. Because they had a negative attitude, they then perceived this person to be less likable. So our brain is doing this all the time, all the time. Some of you might have heard of the phrase confirmation bias, where our expectations mean that when we go into a pool of data, we see what we want to see. But if we see what we want to see, why not be a bit more deliberate about it? Because it turns out that if you're just a bit more intentional about your state of mind before you go into a conversation, any meeting, actually you can really shape the way you experience it. And this isn't airy-fairy positive thinking. This is just being aware of your brain's filters and being more deliberate about where you want to set them. So I went to that meeting with Lucas, and I was in a foul mood, so I saw what? Everything that confirmed that I should be in a foul mood. If I'd gone and thought, okay, my job here is to bring the people dimension, that's my real aim, I would have noticed lots of opportunities to really kind of deepen the sense of connection that was being formed in the room. If I'd checked my attitude and my assumptions about this fact that it was going to be a bad meeting, I could have asked myself, is that going to serve my aim? I could choose to put it aside. I might challenge it even to say, actually, I have had a good video conference once in 1998. Maybe this one will be another one. And, the simplest question, if you don't have time to ask yourself any of those other questions, the simplest question to ask yourself is, where do I want to put my attention? And this works very quickly. This is the sort of thing I use in the morning when, I'm stuck in traffic or having problems with the tube. I say, okay, I notice that I'm in a bad mood. I notice that I'm going to then be really experiencing that kind of get out of bed the wrong side. Everybody is going to seem like a jerk because I'm in a bad mood. So I can break the cycle. I can say, okay, what do I want to notice? I want to notice in the next 5 minutes something good. Please, I want to see something good. Maybe 3 things that are good. And I might then notice, I don't know, this great T-shirt, dadding it. That might make me smile. I might notice that someone's gone and helped someone with their bag. These things don't have to be big, but as soon as you have good things that are top of mind, you've reset your filters, and that can change the way you then perceive what happens afterwards. So, you can truly edit the way you experience reality. No kidding. 10 seconds, walking in to anything. Next thing I want to talk about, how can you make time go further? How can you make time go further? Who wants more time? Yes, okay. I'm going to get this audience to demonstrate that, and probably your favorite technique, Anthony. So I'm going to ask you to do this out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Count out loud as fast as you can, with a bit of energy, with a bit of end-of-day energy. On my mark, are you clear what I want you to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out loud. Ready? Go! Bloody hell. All right. Now I'd like you to do the same with letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Oh! Same thing again. Fast, on my mark, with some panache, if you like. Whatever that means. Are you ready? Go. Fantastic. Now, I'd like you to do something which should take the same amount of time put together. I'd like you to do them mixed up. So A1, B2, C3, etc., all the way up to 7. You ready? What? Okay, go. Did you just give up? That's fantastic. I actually think you did better than many groups, I will say. So, congratulations, you've just summarised 20 years of research into multitasking. You may give yourselves a round of applause. Yes. Yes. Well done. It turns out, yes, when we try to multitask, research has found that we slow ourselves right down. Did you notice that? Leading question now. When were you faster? When you were doing it separately or mixed up? You know what the right answer is. Separately. When did you make more mistakes? When you did it separately or mixed up? You can speak, it's okay. Mixed up, right. And that's what research finds. When you multitask, when you ask yourself to do more than one thing at once, you make between 2 and 4 times as many errors. And there are also studies that show that you're just less good at being wise, making good decisions, harder to be creative, and so on. Now, why? Why is that? Turns out it's another thing to do with the way that the brain processes information. As well as only being able to process some information, the conscious part of your brain can only do one thing at a time, truly only do one thing at a time. If it's automatic and you're on autopilot, you can do many things at once. That's why you can walk to work and maybe look at your phone. But when you're doing something that requires conscious attention, what your brain is actually having to do is switch on one task, switch off another. So what happens is, as you're switching from one task to the other, so letters to numbers, over-egging this just a little bit, to letters to numbers, each of those switches takes a small amount of time and mental energy. Your brain is having to switch one off and switch another task on. And that's what adds up. That's why we make so many more mistakes and we are so much slower. Because it's not just that you slow yourself down. If you make mistakes in the real world, outside the lab, you have to redo the work. So, how do you get more time in the day? Well, we are all wiser, faster, smarter, faster, more creative, faster, if we single task more. And that means really being smart about how can I realistically, for the work that really matters most, where I do want to be smart, productive, nailing it, creative, how can I be more deliberate about taking myself probably offline, right? It's not that there aren't important tasks where we are online, but how can we give ourselves a break from the constant interruptions? 150 times we switch on our phone every day, turns out. I don't know, I think that sounds low, actually. And if each of those interruptions is actually harming our performance, how can we be more deliberate when we're thinking about the tasks that really matter to us? Another thing that really helps when we're trying to single task more, do one thing at a time, do deep work and keep focused, is to think about how you might batch together tasks. Because if you think about it, if you group together tasks that are quite similar, you don't have to do so many switches. So the more that you can batch your email processing so that you're doing it 2 or 3 times a day rather than 2 or 3 times a minute, then you'll get through your email faster and you'll have fewer interruptions. You've got to be kind to yourself, though. You've got to start with something that's realistic as a goal. When, as Anthony says, I wrote an article about this a long time ago, so I was kind of quite good at doing the airplane mode and closing down my browser and kind of going to a separate space to kind of do my single tasking and put noise-cancelling headphones on and so forth. And then I quit my job to write a book, and I thought, well, I'll single task for 90 minutes, no problem. What was actually happening was I was so used to being in an office environment, I had just lost the knack of being on my own all the time. The shift in context made it a lot harder to maintain the kind of single tasking focus I thought I was really good at. And what was happening was after 10 minutes, I was starting to twitch, just looking around. At one point, I noticed my hand. I use a trackball mouse with my left hand, so I've got RSI. And I noticed my hand just kind of like crawling towards the mouse, like it wasn't part of me. I thought, oh, for heaven's sake. So at that point, I thought, okay, fine. If I can only do 10 minutes, I can only do 10 minutes. I'm going to get a timer, put it on my desk, count it down from 10 minutes, then I'm going to feel great about doing that, and then I'm going to build up from there. Because brain likes repeating things that feel rewarding. Brain does not like repeating things that do not feel rewarding. So you don't want to beat yourself up about small changes that you're trying to make in your life. The smaller they are, the more achievable they are, the more likely you are to shift your personal habits, okay? So, do a bit more single tasking and you'll essentially claim back some time in the day. Now, finally, I want to just say something quickly about other people's moods, because, you know, they really do affect the way we feel about our days, don't they? All right, so I was one day in Paris coaching 3 people, 3 lawyers, and it was a lovely session. I don't know whether that spells lovely session to you, 3 lawyers in Paris, but it was nice. It was nice. The idea was I was coaching them, and then they were also coaching each other, which was great. They were really kind of getting into it. They were, you know how you can be really wise when you're advising someone else on something? Yeah, so they were having that experience of feeling incredibly wise, of giving other people advice on topics that they were all wrestling with. So there they were. Wonderful. There was a 4th person who was running late, and I knew she was running late, so that was fine. But I hadn't bargained for how she was going to come in. Now I've got to think about where I'm going to do this. She flung open the door. Flung herself down into the chair, making horse noises like this. And the stress was just kind of rippling off her. And it was really striking. What happened was that within a second or 2, you could feel the room change. You've probably seen this happen. If someone comes into the room, you can see the mood change. And research is really clear on this. Our moods do sync up within 5 minutes with people around us. Lots of debate on exactly how it happens, but our emotions are really, really contagious. So what was happening then was that the other guys were saying, oh my God, when is the next session? I can't make the next session. That's really annoying. Like, what was happening? At the beginning of the session, everybody was super happy. So I thought, okay, well, if she's contagious, what's the next conclusion? I'm contagious too. So I've got a point of choice. I can decide what to put into the room. I can decide to project the irritation and worry, actually, that I'm now feeling about the fact this is going to go terribly wrong. Or I can do something different. I can project something more positive into the room. I don't mean in a woo-woo way, but I will be honest, as I thought then, what is the positive thing that I can project into the room? I thought, in that split second, I can project love into the room. I did not say to these 3 hard-button lawyers, I'm now about to project love at you, suckers. But I did think, okay, what do I love about working with these people? What do I love about working with these people? Okay, I thought of my husband. It was Valentine's Day in my defense, so I was, I thought about anything that would put me in that frame of mind, and I put that out into the room. I am not a woo-woo person, but I will say that I felt settling within seconds. Within a couple of minutes, the vibe in the room had changed. I was sitting there steady, smiling, projecting a different vibe into the room. And you might say, yeah, but wouldn't it have just blown over anyway? And you might be right, but I will tell you that if I had projected what I was honestly feeling, which was my aggravation, then it would definitely have escalated. Was knowing that I had this opportunity to be a force for good enabled me to make a different choice, knowing that I had this sort of small, weird amount of control over the feeling in the room. So you might then say, yeah, but how can you possibly think about feeling love at that moment with this really annoying person there? And this is where it really helps to know about something called the fundamental attribution error, which is, do any of you know this fundamental attribution? Right, so yes, okay, fantastic. So fundamental attribution error, basic thing in psychology. If I turn up at work and I'm cranky and I'm inefficient, I know it's because I slept badly last night. if you turn up at work and you're cranky and inefficient, not that I'm pointing at anyone in particular, I decide that you're unpleasant and inefficient in a way that is irretrievable. When we have bad behavior in ourselves, we know that it's caused by bad circumstances most of the time. When we see bad behavior in other people, we attribute it to bad character. And so it really helped me to know that she's probably juggling a ton of stuff. It really helps to remind yourself, this is probably a good person in bad circumstances. I just need to think what the circumstances might be. And you don't have to get a serious story in your mind. In my case, this is not a dead cat. It is resting. I tend to like to think of someone having had their cat vomit on them in the morning. This is my go-to story for assuming good person, bad circumstances if I can't come up with anything else. And what that does is it helps shift my demeanor so that I become more sympathetic. And that changes the space between me and the other person, enough to shift the way that the whole interaction feels. So, in summary, if you're thinking about tiniest seconds worth of action that you can take to shift the way your days feel, you can shift the way that every experience feels by just being more intentional about what's top of mind as you go into them. You can steal back more time in the day by doing as much single tasking as you can, but if nothing else, 5 or 10 minutes will still give you a bit of boost. And you can make everybody's mood better by assuming good person, bad circumstances, and knowing that you can be a force for good. And I would encourage you, as you go into drinks this evening, to try all of these things, and you'll magically discover that the person that you're talking to is so much nicer as a result. And if you can do all of these things every day, then it's a fantastic recipe for a few more good days in your life. And the more good days you have, then the better lives you're going to have too. Thank you.